Welcome to Revolution Network. This is Dr. Jason Dean, your source for health, freedom, and knowledge. And I'm actually with a very special, amazing gentleman today. People have been knocking my door down to learn about cryptocurrency. And so I have Sam Dodson on today, who does this stuff for a living. Very, very smart. And first of all, Sam, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate you having you here.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Awesome. And we're going to dive into the basics. So Sam works on this at a very high level. He's very smart, and we're going to go with the basics, and then he's going to drop in any more details that he possibly can to help us even with a little more advanced stuff. So, but first of all, before we get here, let's learn a little bit about you. What's your background? How did you even get involved in this stuff? Let everyone know who you are.
Okay, so I went to school, got an electrical engineering degree, worked in telecom for about a decade. Got kind of disillusioned with the whole corporate world. Went off. I found this pot. Well, I did some training that out of that I was giving some speeches, and some of those were politically centered. And somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, do you know what a podcast is?" And this was 20 years ago. I'm like, I have no idea. But he said, "I think you'd be great at it. You should. I'm challenging you to create a podcast." I'm like, okay. So I went out, found the #1 podcast on a ranking site. That was a radio show, a nationally syndicated radio program called Free Talk Live. I started listening. I eventually started calling in. I eventually, went up there and visited them in New Hampshire. I eventually became a co-host on the program with them once a week, and got into media. I moved up to New Hampshire for a couple years and was an activist. Those guys had some of the early Bitcoin developers come and talk to them, the Mark and Ian, the two co-hosts, and say, hey, this is going to be big. And of course, Roger Ver was kind of in that circle of people. And so, that's how I found crypto. I eventually moved back to Texas to my family farm and had kids or a kid and that sort of thing. So, and here I am.
And here you are. And before we jumped on, I was like, you do this full time, because when you jump into the YouTube world and you're talking to people and they're experts in the area and they have a lot of experience in it, but you're like, are you doing it full time? You're like, yeah, I'm in full time. Like I'm waiting for this thing to pop. So you work with this every single day, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Awesome.
I do some other things here and there, with my brother or whatnot, but for the most part, this is it.
Nice. I bought my Ledger the other day, and I'm now using my Ledger. And I jumped into this a couple years ago because I heard that Ripple. Now I didn't buy into Bitcoin so much. I did a little bit, but I really jumped into Ripple. One, because I heard that before all this chaos went down, that it was going to be, quote unquote, the central bank. It was going to be the new banking system, and at 20 cents or 17 cents a coin, I was like, okay, well, I can't really lose. So I jumped in. I would love to give everyone a little bit of a basic understanding of what crypto is. They think that there's these little coins. Are they real? Are they not real? Just give us a basic understanding for all the viewers.
Sure. Cryptocurrency represents a paradigm shift, and I mentioned I want to go back to Napster because the same kind of evolution happened there. We were all going to the stores buying CDs that would skip after a year, no matter how careful you were with them, and you could order from the catalog, but that was it. And then all of a sudden, this guy in his dorm wrote this software to share music with his friends, and it just blew up. And all of a sudden, the digital music evolution is upon us, right? But Napster had some problems. You had to be logged in to a central server. You could only share with one person at a time. Everything was centralized there, and they got attacked. And of course, Napster is still around. You can go to Napster.com right now, create an account, but nobody's using it. But what came out of that was Kazaa, eMule, eDonkey, a number of other ones, until eventually the next paradigm shift happened, which was BitTorrent, which lets you, somebody puts new content out, and then I come in and download it, and as I'm downloading pieces, I'm sharing those with other people that want it, and they share with other people. So it was a really efficient way to distribute information. It separated the listing services from the hosting the people actually hosting the content, and it really it created a system that was anti-fragile. There's some books written around the idea of anti-fragility, You cut off the arm of a starfish, it grows another starfish. That's what we have. And so the basic paradigm shift there was that we didn't need this third-party intermediary. We could do it peer-to-peer. And so Bitcoin stepped onto the scene with that same idea for money. I don't need Chase Bank to be this trusted authority that tells me how much money I have in my account. I can set up a network that has a set of rules. It has rules, but no rulers. It's an anarchistic based or ideology behind it. And everybody that's participating in the network is agreeing to those rules. Otherwise, they won't be able to participate. And it lets me, transfer value person to person. It lets me join the network. So there's some basic principles around cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. They're trustless, meaning I don't have to trust a Chase Bank. They're decentralized. So with Bitcoin, you have I think it's over 10,000 people that have nodes, which keep all of the transaction history like stored on a computer at their house, and they're connected to the network and syncing up new transactions. So it's very hard for somebody to come in and say, no, this is the history. These are the account balances. So it's decentralized in that manner. It is immutable, meaning nobody can go back and rewrite the history of those transactions. It is it's resistant to attack, be it state-sponsored attack or any other form. So if somebody wants to come in and try and take over the network, they're going to have to. There's ways they can do it with Bitcoin, and we'll get to that, but they're going to have to expend tremendous resources in order to shut down the network. And really, I don't think they'd be able to do it at this point. So all of those principles really empower individuals and sort of wipe away the need for all of this banking industry that we have today. Now, that's part of the problem there is, in order to do that, it takes a paradigm shift in the thinking, the mind of individuals. And I think that's where a lot of Bitcoiners kind of go off the track, right? Is they think that what needs to happen next is everyone needs to close their bank accounts and open these digital wallets and learn how to, back up their private key and, use this wallet. And my mom, meanwhile, can't figure out how to log into uphold.com. So that's not going to happen.
And that's the scary thing that everyone thinks about. And I'm glad you said that, because that's what everyone's a little bit terrified. Like, oh my gosh, do I get rid of all my money? Do I have to take it all out of the bank? I'm like, no, those are red flags. You don't want to do that. But it's not going to just flip over. Everyone's going to lose everything, and grandma's going to have to tap into a computer that she doesn't know how to operate. So I appreciate you saying that, but continue on.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so that takes us to kind of the next. So that's, in my view, Bitcoin is the Napster of the digital music revolution, right? It sparked this great idea. It started this evolution of finance, of banking, of how we think about money. At the same time, it's got some shortcomings, right? It can only process 8 transactions per second on a global, for 0.001% of the technical geeks that were using it 10 years ago. That was great. You could send money for next to nothing. But today, when you have probably around 1 to 5%, somewhere in there, using Bitcoin, average transaction fees are like $3.50. Right. So now we're at a point where if you want to send somebody $1, well, you can't, because the transaction fee costs more. And of course, there's a queue right now. There's something called mempool, which is where it's kind of like a waiting, the hospital waiting room. When the doctors get overloaded, they can only take 8 per second. So right now I think it's like 40,000 transactions that are waiting to be processed, right? So, and that's nothing. During the 2017 bull run, which a lot of your viewers have probably heard about, when Bitcoin was at $20,000, the average fee was $55, and the wait time was, I think, 4 hours.
Wow.
And people were paying $100, $200 to put their transaction in the next block. That's how bad it is. So, you can't use that for Starbucks to go buy your coffee for your $5 cup of coffee if the transaction fee is going to be $55
Right.
and you're going to wait 4 hours before you get it. It's not viable, right? And of course, what they're doing, the whole Bitcoin ideology is, do you have something called layer 1 and layer 2? So layer 1 is where you're using the core network that we've just described, or that I've just described. Layer 2 is where you kind of put something on top of that, where third parties hold the Bitcoin, like you would send it in one time, and then you'd be able to send it cheaper and faster over something called like the Lightning Network. Well, guess what? Now you're back to a third-party intermediary. Now you're not holding your crypto, so you're trusting this third-party intermediary.
Right.
So all those principles that we described in the beginning of layer 1 that make Bitcoin great, you have to abandon those to go to layer 2. And so that's where I think Bitcoin is coming up short. And if you look at the original white paper, it lays out an electronic, like, digital cash system, something that can be used for commerce. And that was the narrative. When Bitcoin first came out, they were like, oh, this is going to take over the banking system. Get ready. We're going to wipe them out in 10 years. And of course, that hasn't happened. And then the use case shifted from replacing banking to, well, it's going to be used for digital commerce everywhere. And of course, the 8 transaction per second proved, that's not viable. And now it's resorted to, well, it's a store of value, which basically means I'm going to buy some, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to wait for it to go up, because, the thing that Bitcoin really has going for it, in my opinion, is its first mover advantage. It's the Napster that everybody knows the name. When you talk crypto, what do people say? Which one? They're going to say Bitcoin. Right? They don't know about Dash or XRP or Ethereum, right, but they'll know Bitcoin.
Right.
So it's got first mover advantage, and it's got name brand recognition.
Right.
So as the space kind of blows up and more people come in, they're going to buy Bitcoin. And I've said, I think by 2022 we could probably see 6-figure Bitcoin. The problem is there's no utility, right? And so without that utility, you're basically holding a bag waiting to sell to the greater fool. So that's why yes, I see there's an opportunity to make, to see some gains buying Bitcoin and holding it, but I have a problem with holding something, selling it to somebody else, knowing that they're probably going to lose their shirt on it. So what I did is I went around and looked for, okay, what cryptocurrencies have actual utility? And that's where, a Facebook group, do you want me to talk about that at all?
Go for it.
Okay.
I think it's actually hilarious. That's why. I heard Sam in another YouTube interview, and someone else was listening to it at the same time. And when he mentioned the name of this group, I just burst out laughing, because just by looking at Sam, I don't think Sam is the type of person who would be involved with these 3 things he's talking about. But that's why it's so hilarious, because he looks like a pretty clean cut, dad and everything else. But go ahead, because it's a funny group name. Okay,
so I had kind of put crypto aside for a number of years, but 4 or 5, I think it's about 4 years ago, some of my friends from New Hampshire that did real well on Bitcoin and sort of driving an Audi R8 and all that, he grabbed me and brought me into this secret Facebook group called Lambos, Hookers, and Blow, version 2. I'm not sure what happened to version 1, but I have some ideas about that. And they, in there, they talk about 2 coins that they really like. One of them is XRP, and that's tied in with a company called Ripple, and we'll talk about that some more. The other is Monero, which is in my mind the premier privacy coin. You've got others out there like Zcash and Dash and so forth, but they have problems. And Monero is the only one where I think it's Homeland Security has like a $500,000 grant out there for researchers to try and give them a view into the transactions and so forth that are moving around in Monero, because Monero is basically like this black hole where you can't you as a wallet holder have security and the protocols built to where your funds are safe and you can spend them and use them like normal, but you can't see the transactions moving around publicly. There's no audit. It's basically like cash. When I go and spend cash, nobody knows in the government knows who I gave that to.
Right.
And we should have that alternative. It's a very important privacy right. Whereas the other ones, they've managed to crack and they can track and so forth. So those are the two that they really liked. And I took and just kind of sat back, watched the group, talk about these things and so forth, and eventually decided to dig in and learn, okay, what is Ripple and what is Xcurrent and XVIA and XRapid? Those don't exist anymore. But basically, what happened is some of the original Bitcoin developers back in 2012, they looked at Bitcoin and they said, you know what? This whole proof of work, which is the way Bitcoin and like 80-90% of the cryptocurrencies work, is this idea of mining Bitcoins. You might have heard about Bitcoin mining.
Right.
They're trying to basically guess this hash number that gets longer. The more people mine, the longer it gets. So the more electricity they burn. And it is a crazy, crazy amount of electricity and that's being consumed in order to solve this problem that basically prevents double spend and orders transactions and prevents double spend. That's all that proof of work mining does. So you have the problem with crypto where if I have 1 Bitcoin in my wallet and I send 1 Bitcoin to Sue and 1 Bitcoin to Mike, and I do it at the same time, only one of those is valid because I only have the 1 Bitcoin in my wallet. So what the network has to do is figure out, okay, which one came first, and this one's valid, this one's not. So that's the whole idea of preventing the double spend. Well, these people looked at this and said, you know what, there's a better way to do this. There's something called consensus. And they came up, this is Jeb McCaleb and Arthur Brito and Chris Larson and David Schwartz, who's now the CTO of Ripple. And they came up with this idea of validators rather than miners, and the idea of consensus and just a different way to work it. And so instead of having that instead of mining blocks, basically Ripple was pre-mined, and so they created 100 billion Ripple or XRP. They were Ripples at the time, versus Bitcoin having 21 million. They created the 100 million. And then the founders kept 20%. They gifted the other 80% to this company, Ripple, to create a use case and drive utility. Bitcoin doesn't really have anything like that, and it doesn't have a use case, in my view, at the current time. And then they set out to start solving problems with it. And the first thing that they really set their sights on was cross-border payments, was removing the friction from the payment system. So today, if you want to send money to somebody in another country, or 10 years ago, you would go to the bank, you would fill out a wire transfer form that's using the SWIFT system, which is a kind of a conglomerate of banks that are members that created this organization that handles these wire transfers. It's 40-year-old technology. It costs you about $40 to $60 to send it. So, really high transaction fee, right up there with Bitcoin during its peak. And it takes 2 to 3 days, typically. It can take up to 10 days. And if you get something wrong on the address, well, then it gets sent back, and it's going to take, a full 10 days before it comes back to you. And then you got to repeat it again. Of course, you're open to the FX exchange risk during the transaction period of 2 to 10 days. So a lot of times they'll run out of money because the exchange rate changes so much and enough money doesn't arrive at the destination. So then you have to do another one, pay another $60 to send the extra $20 or whatever it is to top off and meet the invoice requirement. So it's just this really cumbersome system. And what Ripple has done is they've created this, they've positioned XRP as this global bridge asset, to where a company like in the U.S. wants to send money to Mexico, and this is MoneyGram's doing this. They will take and deposit money on an exchange, a crypto exchange, just like a stock market exchange, but you're trading cryptos. And they trade their fiat for XRP. They send their XRP to Bitso, an exchange in Mexico, the biggest one. And then it gets sold for Mexican pesos and then deposited in the account. And the whole thing's done in 60 seconds.
Wow.
So you don't have that exchange risk. You don't have the 6% error rate. Sometimes on the Swift, the funds go out and they get lost. They never come back. Nobody knows what happens to them because their system is equivalent to like putting a postcard in the mail. You don't know what route it's going to take to get there. You don't know where it is. You don't know if it's been delivered. Whereas RippleNet changes all that. It's got bidirectional messaging. The whole thing happens. It's all the rates are predetermined. It's basically just the modern kind of computing and infrastructure that we would expect. Living in an age where I can bring up a video stream from somebody on the other side of the world and watch it live.
Right.
So it really represents a paradigm shift. And so over the last several years, they've sold $1 billion worth of XRP out into the marketplace because they have to build liquidity and get it out there. And then what they've done behind the scenes is they've taken, I think it's around $600 million, and they have given that to this company called Xspring, or Spring is how they pronounce it. And this is kind of like an incubator system that takes and funds different projects. So right now there is something called Grant for the Web. So if you have any like web developers, programmers in your audience, there is a $100 million grant. Proposals are due middle of next month, where they're looking for ways to improve or bring about the Internet of Value. So this idea of, like Netflix, you go and you sign up for a subscription, right? But in the future, what you might have is a 720p or a 1080p streaming service where you pay, $10 a month for, or whatever that is. And rather than having an account on Netflix, you just go to Netflix, you turn on and you pick your show and you start watching it. And as it's streaming content to you, you're streaming money back to Netflix. And so that's the whole Internet of Value concept. So they're doing that with gaming. They gave, I think it was $100 million to Forte, which is a big game developer, to incorporate XRP and the Internet of Value into their gaming platforms. There's Cinnamon Video, there's Coil. They've enabled Imager. I have a Coil subscription, which is where I pay $5 a month. And then when I go and browse Imager, there's no ads. So they're trying to also like redefine this whole ad model of the internet as well, to where, today everybody wants to track you. They want to know what you're doing, what website you're going to, whether you're using their app or not. If it's on your phone, it's most likely turned into the spy device, right?
Right.
And so that's sort of a symptom of the broken model where today, with today's banking and payment systems, you can't send a fraction of a penny because it's just too expensive. Right. And the Internet of Value, crypto, throws that paradigm out and will let you send a fraction of a penny. Of course, you can't use Bitcoin to do that because the fees are $5.
Right.
But yet with XRP, they've solved that by kind of moving away from proof of work into consensus. And their transactions per second, their throughput, instead of 8 is 1,500. Their transaction time is about 2 seconds versus Bitcoin being 10 minutes to several hours. I actually sent a transaction with a low fee during the Bitcoin bull run, and it took over a week to get it. So
it seems like a new, almost encrypted way. Like it almost seems like two platforms are going to be running side by side. You have kind of like the central bank type platform because they're in on it as well. But then you also have like this very libertarianish model, which is open source but also very encrypted to the point where it can't be broken into. And so it's kind of those two running together. But if you're like us, we want a lot of privacy, and that's all there with the whole blockchain as well.
Yeah. So there's a couple things there. It's not that they can't break into it. So in the case of Bitcoin and XRP, those are public ledgers. So they can see everybody's transactions, and what they've been doing is going around to these exchanges and saying, aha, you have to KYC AML, which is know your customer, anti-money laundering rules, where basically give us your ID and we're going to report you to the government so they know when you're moving money around in our exchange. With Monero, I guess you could still do that and they would know when money comes in, but they can't see those transactions. It's really, think of it like a digital cash. But what they can't do is they can't come in and control it. They can't come in and inflate the supply of Bitcoin or of XRP. They don't have that capability. And I think what's happening, just like, we went from Napster to peer-to-peer music, and that's why we have Apple and Google and Spotify and all these others. We started with Bitcoin, and now we're moving into this crypto paradigm. Now, the Bitcoin purists or maximalists, what they think is, like we were talking about, everybody's mom needs to switch over and start using a Bitcoin wallet on their phone, and that's the answer. What Ripple's doing is they're going out and plugging into the back-end banking infrastructure. So they are, customers today are using that infrastructure. What they're doing is plugging into the back end of it. And eventually, I think you will see banks doing crypto custody, where you'll have your fiat balance and maybe your Bitcoin balance and your XRP balance and whatever else, whatever other cryptocurrencies they want to offer. But there is no doubt a Game of Thrones happening behind the scenes, and Libra. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with that.
The Facebook one, right?
Yes, exactly. That was absolutely like this
dead
band
on arrival.
Of corporates. Go ahead.
Dead on arrival.
Well, it wasn't, but see, what happened there is you had this group of corporates banding together, coming in on the attack, and they were trying to get a seat at the global financial table, right? And the bankers are like, oh, no, get out of here with that. And all the governments attacked them and basically scuttled it, right? So now what we have going on, at least in the U.S., is, I don't know if you saw the bill that the Democrats put out for the first relief. I did a video about it, but basically it was the idea of the digital wallet.
Digital wallet. Yeah, everyone panicked about that, which is actually a really good transition, because the next question I was going to ask was, everyone is paranoid about crypto being, quote unquote, the new world order, mark of the beast, whatever you want to talk about, is like pulling us into this. And you and I are obviously on the opposite side of that, is we want very free market, libertarian economics, et cetera. So go right into that, because I remember reading that in the actual bill.
Okay. Yeah. So what's happening behind the scenes, the central banks, they have their fiat system, and it is digital, but it's not crypto, I guess. So what they're coming up with is something called CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. Now, what's happening in the U.S. is this same kind of Game of Thrones battle going on. When the Democrats put their relief bill for COVID forth, it had a digital wallet that was created by the Federal Reserve, and they were going to require all the banks to incorporate this into their infrastructure, into their online banking platforms, and they were required to show the Federal Reserve branding. So in the minds of the consumers, oh, this is a Federal Reserve wallet, right? And then a few weeks later, the Republican version comes out, and it's got basically the same thing in there, but it's the U.S. Treasury.
Oh, interesting. Right? I didn't see that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So I think what was happening is that Democrat one was like the deep state attempt to, sink the hooks of the Federal Reserve deeper into the minds of consumers and like cement their place. Whereas I think what Trump's doing in the whole Q thing is trying to kind of root them out and maybe get rid of the Federal Reserve. But CBDCs are coming either way. What they're going to be is walled gardens. So, going back to Ripple being this bridge asset, well, between the United States and Europe, that's there's a lot of liquidity, a lot of money flowing back and forth because there's a lot of trade between those countries. So XRP is maybe doesn't have a strong use case there, but if you're talking South Africa, a South African bank and an Iceland bank, well, they're probably not trading millions of dollars a day. So that's where being able to buy something like XRP in South Africa, send it to Iceland, sell it there, convert it into a local currency, and complete the transaction, that has a pretty compelling use case, right?
Yeah. You're making me feel even better about this now.
Okay. So, central bank digital currencies are coming. Are they the mark of the beast? No. What they're doing, what digital currencies or crypto enables is far greater levels of tracking, of taxation. It's a whole new paradigm. It's a wet dream for these guys in a lot of ways, right? Because they'll know every dollar you spend on that digital wallet or on, using XRP. And if you're not using something like Monero, a privacy coin, or Elixir is another one, they're going to be able to see where you're sending your money, how much you have, when you got it, when you spent it, every little detail. And so we're moving into this world where everything's tracked. Your cars are tracking you, your phones are tracking you, your money's being tracked, and they will come up with all kinds of new taxation regimes around this, I have no doubt. At the same time, because Ripple's plugging into this back end of the banking system and slowly bringing the normies around to the idea of cryptocurrency, I think it's an inevitable next step, just like we had from Napster to Bitcoin and from Bitcoin to Ripple and XRP. We're going to be in a paradigm where, the government will have their CBDC, their central bank digital currency, their digital fiat that they're inflating away to fund endless wars and government programs to study tree frogs in Africa or whatever. $10 million for that. And that money's going to be losing value. And you're going to have consumers will have the ability to seamlessly move their money between a CBDC or something with sound money based on the principles of sound money like XRP or one of the privacy coins or whatever. So where are they going to keep their value? Obviously, it's going to be in a trustless, decentralized, immutable blockchain cryptocurrency. And when that happens, it's like as that happens more and more, the bottom's going to fall out on fiat, right? Because there's going to be so much less demand for it. And of course, if I'm a vendor, I have a business, I'm going to want to get paid in crypto rather than fiat. And the only time I'm going to want fiat or the CBDC is when I have to pay the government, right? Everything else, I want to keep it in crypto because that's going to preserve my wealth. And so when that demand falls away, it's going to result in less demand, greater and greater and greater supply. That leads to hyperinflation. And it's not just going to be something that's limited to one country. It's going to be a paradigm shift that the whole planet embarks on, right? So what's going to happen to governments when they can't just, we want to go invade this country. Well, let's print up a few $1 trillion. They can't do that because the consequences will be far more immediate and far more impactful than they are today.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I kind of, as you're saying this, I envision this like two systems running together where like the people, and I know so many people are still concerned out there and still worried about like, it sounds Big Brother, it sounds this, it sounds that, but at the same time, it sounds like you have two systems running, which is one is basically, out or open source for the people, very private, and then you still have the federal government one or the deep state one working on the other side as well, but they're going to lose confidence in that one, and slowly it'll transition over to, for us, the way we want to, which actually shrinks government, which is actually a really good thing. And so over the next, it's not going to happen next year, obviously, but over the next maybe 5 to 10 years, we end up winning this thing long term, and you're still going to have probably paper currencies in certain places. It doesn't mean everything disappears, because a lot of people are worried about where the money in their bank goes. They don't want to lose their money. And I've been saying, I'm not obviously a financial advisor, but I don't think your money is going to disappear overnight. It doesn't work that way. Do you think this is going to be backed by any type of either gold or silver, like actual precious metal, as we go forward?
I could share my screen, right?
Yeah, I think you can. I know you sent me an image of this, or an image the other day.
Can you bring that up?
Let me see if I can. I don't know.
If not, I'll work on it too, but I'd like to show your viewers that, because to me, that's like, wow. So while we're doing that, I'll give your viewers the background.
Yeah, go for it.
On Twitter, over the past several years, we've had these people that seem to kind of have like an idea of what's going on. And they've dropped us little hints and things.
And keep in mind, Sam does follow Q. He does follow the deep state. He follows the president. So he knows where a lot of my audience is right now. And my Twitter is not allowing me to get to that image very fast. So, you got it. Do you have it?
There we go.
You got it.
And this was one of the things that they gave us.
Flip over to your screen. I see it, but I don't see it on your main screen where you are.
Okay. Hold on. Let me unshare. Switch screen.
You have it on a different monitor.
And then bring it over here. Does that look good?
1 second. No, it went back to the same spot. Oh, wait. I can do it. Let me see if I can do it here. Okay. Good. I got it.
Oh, I just closed it. Hold on. I'll open it back up. There we go. Okay. And that should come in just a second.
And you might have to scroll back and forth a little bit on it if you can, but they get the idea.
All right. So this was published, I'm thinking it was early 2019. And you can kind of see these are a lot of the cartoons, the Q-related cartoons where you show draining the swamp over here. Trump's working on that. You've got all Obama and Clinton and so forth in jail. You've got the deep state over here showing their deep roots into the financial system. Everybody's out to get Trump. And up here along the top, can you see it okay?
We can see the middle part, but keep going. It's fine, because I'll post this afterwards as well.
Okay, good. So what we have here with the European Union flag is this box around Brexit. And you can see the little UK symbol or outline there. And it kind of draws a line, an arrow across these back to Trump. So the first thing that happened, the way I interpreted this is, first we're going to have Brexit. And of course that was delayed for like a year, 2 years almost. So we're going to have Brexit. That's going to be the first trigger. And then we'll have this national emergency. When this whole thing was going on in China, I tweeted out, I think this is the national emergency that this guy was talking about. Then, and of course, it was an international emergency. Then we come to Q. Of course, what's happening with all the Q stuff? We're actually getting all the D class, and the whole Flynn thing is coming unraveled, and it's starting to look like something's really going to happen. I have my hesitation about Q and my complaints about it and so forth, because I think there's people that take it too far at times.
Right.
But there's some substance to it in my mind, clearly. And then what this leads to is Trump, and you can see there's XRP and Trump, and there's a handshake here between him and Putin, a handshake between Putin and Z, and then of course down here on the bottom, you've got peace. Can you see it okay?
Yep, go ahead. You're fine. I'm going to post it anyway as well.
Maybe that'll work. Peace signs between North and South Korea. And of course, this was published before Trump crossed the parallel into North Korea, first American president ever to do that. And so, this was very, I don't know what the word is for it, but it really, a lot of this has started to come true. And what you can see right here is we've got gold bars between this. You've got BRICS, which is kind of that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Mm-hmm. And that was this alternative to SWIFT, because SWIFT is U.S. controlled, it's deep state controlled, and they've been trying to get out from under that for a while. And so what it's showing is that there's an agreement and gold is involved. And then there was another one. Let me see. Right there. What this one shows is we've got SWIFT right here, and there's some text here I'll read to you. It says transfer of system west to east. So SWIFT is the old U.S. controlled paradigm. The new one is going to be controlled by AIIB, which is the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. It's kind of headed up by China, but there's lots of member countries and so forth that are involved, and they're saying HSBC is going to assist in moving the money. And what we have here is this dollar that's on fire on the bottom. And he's saying dollar system is now gone. However, fiat is here to stay. And so I think that's talking about the transition from the old system that we have that's all debt-based to this new system. And you can see here's the guy holding a bar of gold that's connected to AIIB. And then over here on the right is gold is with his new friend, the standard of the new economy, and that's XRP. So that's what we talked about with it being the global bridge asset. So I think the system that is coming is we're still going to have fiat, we're still going to have CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and maybe the central banking paradigm. It's going to be some kind of fiat that's backed with gold. And the central banks may still exchange gold to kind of settle things up occasionally, but for the most part, they're going to be using XRP to exchange value between countries.
That makes sense. And I actually just shared both screens, so if they need to go back, they can pause the frames at that spot. I shared both so they can see the full thing, and they will have full access to that. So that's awesome. Okay. And then I'll post those as well, as long as you're cool with that. That's not a problem.
Yeah, it's fine.
Good. Now, as we close in the last 15 or 20 minutes here, I would love to get into some of the actual little things that they can do on a daily basis. Now, let's start in just the exchanges, because exchanges are very different than your wallet, I guess you'd say, or your ledger. Okay. What are some of the exchanges that they can go and start doing, like buying crypto? And I'm not going to get into how they buy it today, because obviously that's different for every exchange. But what are some of those common exchanges people can go dive into, like obviously Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Ripple, things like that?
So if you're in the U.S., it's different all around the world, but like the one I send my mom to is uphold.com. I think it's probably the easiest interface, easiest way to buy crypto. You pay a little bit more, but if you're technically challenged, that's your best route. There's, Coinbase, there's Binance is probably the biggest exchange in the world, and a lot of people use Binance. So it just depends, find one. There's YouTube videos that show you how to, walk you through the process. That's what I would recommend, is find one you like. You're going to have to go through the KYC, AML verification and so forth. And then once that's done, you can start buying crypto.
Yeah.
Uphold I like because you can use your bank account. It will lock in the price and then wait for the transfer to come through 2 or 3 days later. Whereas other ones, you'll have to move the money there. You'll have to wait the 2 or 3 days, and then you can buy it. So that's it. The key, though, just like we talked about with Bitcoin, not trusting a third party. The same is true of exchanges, because there's a lot of exchanges out there. Several of them, they get hacked. One of them, Quadrangia CX, I think, was a Canadian exchange, and they were basically day trading with customer funds, lost it all, and went out of business. And those people just lost their crypto. So really, you don't want to store your crypto long-term on an exchange, because you're trusting somebody else with it. What you need to do is create something called a hardware wallet, which is basically, you have with crypto, what you have is a public key, which is your wallet address. That's the one you give out to, and anybody can use that to send you money. And then you have a private key, which is what you need in order to spend money out of the wallet. And what you back up is that private key. And there's various ways to do it. The simplest way is what's called a 12 or 24 word seed word list, which is a series of 24 seed words, easier to remember or write down. And those will let you recover your wallet on any device and be able to spend your Bitcoin. It's basically, or spend your crypto. It's basically a backup for your wallet. Yep. And I use, this is actually underneath here is a titanium plate. It's got I used a jeweler's punch to punch the 24 word seed word list on this plate.
Okay.
And then I sprayed it with Plasti Dip so that you can't see it, and you have to peel it off in order to see it. And that can't be just put back on real quick. It's, it takes several coats and a couple hours to do it. So it's a way to kind of secure it. I made a video called Securing Your Crypto on my channel, To the Lifeboats, that gets into a lot of the specifics and things you need to consider, because there's lots of examples of people that have been robbed for their crypto, like home invasions. They come in and beat you up, and if you've got this at home where people can easily get to it and you've only got one, or it's on your phone. There was a case in Russia. They picked a guy up, threw him in a cab, beat the crap out of him in the back of the cab. He gave up all his crypto. They drugged him, threw him out, and by the time he came to, they had already cleaned out all of his money, and they had moved it, and he was done. And he lost, close to $1 million.
Oh, yeah. Let's not do that.
It's being your own bank comes with, guess what? You get to be your own bank security as well. Right. So there's a lot of things that, you should really consider and think about and prepare for. And so in that video, I kind of laid out some of those cases and some strategies and things, and also walk through how you back up your crypto, why you do it, and so forth. So I'd recommend, once you buy crypto, having the little hardware wallet is the first step. It's good to have that, but you also need to create one of these and take into account all of these other possible threats. So
yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I actually had a crash course this weekend on Saturday for a couple hours of learning, because I got a ledger. And I did what you should not do. Luckily, it worked out okay for me. But I years ago bought my first Ripple on Bittrex, and I didn't know anything about it. So I literally bought it because it was, I think, 17 cents a coin. I bought a couple $100 worth at the time, and I let it sit there, not knowing. And then I heard about, obviously it's not safe there. So I got the ledger. I was able to pull it all down, so everything was cool. But like you said, it's not a good idea to leave stuff out there. Get it on and the ledger costs like $50. You can get some more expensive one, things like that. But a lot of people, a lot of these terms that we talked about, everything from crypto to the exchanges and things like that, are confusing because people have never heard of them before. Yes. And so it sounds like it's really challenging and difficult to get into this market. But at the same time, I learned my ledger in, honestly, probably about an hour, all the codes and everything else. And after that, it was actually very simple. I downloaded everything. It was super easy. So I don't want people to be too afraid just because it looks like this big hill to climb. But we are going into, what I'm hearing from several very successful people out there, and you can talk on this as we close out, is this is the biggest transfer of wealth possibly in the history, at least we know, of our planet. And so as we close out today, kind of give a summary on that from what you understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Reserve currencies have a shelf life of about 200 years, and the U.S. dollar is right there. But it's so much bigger. People compare this to Ripple being the Amazon or the Apple of the .com boom, or eBay or whatever. But it's so much bigger than that, because we're talking about all the money moving around all around the world. Everybody uses it. And what I think is happening, and kind of Marvin Gaye, those two graphics really sum it up beautifully, is we're moving into this system where you'll have these different walled gardens, these different CBDCs around there, but XRP is going to be the bridge that moves value around. You add to that all of the Internet of Value stuff that's happening, where we're going to be in a world where your phone is automatically signing you up for Wi-Fi if you end up using it, It's happening all in the background, and it's a fraction of a few cents to do it. So we're moving into a world where machines are paying other machines, and it's because the friction is going to be removed from payments. Ripple uses this analogy of the shipping container, and I did a video where I kind of expanded on that idea. Before the shipping container, it took hours, it took days sometimes to unload a ship. Now that we have this standardized unit of transfer and all the infrastructure built to load and unload the ships, man, it happens so much faster. And global shipping over the next 10 years exploded by 700%. So not only are we moving into this wealth transfer, but at the same time, the friction to move money around is almost going to zero. It's gonna become like something we don't even think about. There is no fee to transfer money anymore, or it's so small, nobody cares. And as a result of that friction being removed, we're going to see an explosion in the amount of money that's moving around. So at the same time, we have fiat dying and possible hyperinflation on the horizon, and all of these food riots and all this stuff that's potentially on the horizon. We also have this paradigm shift that's going to breathe fire into the global economy in ways that I think few people can imagine. I mean, you think about logging into email 10 years ago to send your first email versus the apps that we have on our cell phone and the computer that we carry around in our pocket today. Who could have imagined that what was going to take place in the next 10 to 20 years? Very few people. And I think that's the same thing that's happening to money right now.
It makes a lot of sense, and it's so fascinating because I hear a lot of people going, well, I'm not going to go to that system. We're just going to stay with cash, and we're going to do this. And guess what? Unless you plan on going out and to live in the middle of the absolute woods where no one can find you and be completely, absolutely 100% self-sufficient, we're definitely going to this. And my theory is I don't necessarily think I'm going to go survive in the woods, and nor do I really want to right now. I'd like to have a little house out there, but I'm not going to stay there. Is that we as libertarian or conservative or constitutional-minded people, we jump into this market and we force this market to go the way of a free market system where we ultimately get control back over governments long term, and then obviously, like you said earlier, that the government system where it's fiat money, they shrink away because they just can't hang, and we ultimately win in the end.
They're working from a paradigm that no longer exists. I mean, that's the reality that we're moving into. They're just, I don't see them being able to adapt. So whatever's going to come out on the other side, I don't even know if we'll call it government in the traditional sense that we have today, because I don't think it's going to look very much like it used to. And like part of, yes, are we going along with, by telling people, hey, I think Ripple's a great investment and you should consider getting some, or crypto in general? Am I leading people down the path to, greater control and dominance by the state? Yes. At the same time, though, it's going to give you the resources to be able to do something about it, to be able to create those alternatives that come out on the other side that obsolete functions that the government used to serve. And I think, that's one of the things the Lambos, Hookers, and Blow group really taught me is like, you can have your principles and you can stand on those principles and you can be right. And then afterwards, you still won't be able to do anything about it, but you'll be able to stand on your soapbox on the street corner, or you could ride the coattails of this new system that's being rolled out, and then you'll have those resources to be able to actually put your money where your mouth is and do something about it. And that's something I talk to my audience about. It's not great. Lambos and Hookers and Blow and all that is fun. But at the same time, what are you going to do with your life? What kind of difference do you want to make? Who do you want to be? And how do you want to be remembered? That's what's really important.
It sounds a little bit like President Trump is playing The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and you can do the same thing with cryptocurrency. Is you keep your friends close, your enemies closer. You work with your enemies until they help destroy themselves, and then you win in the end with what your friends are.
Yes. Yeah, Trump's a smart guy. I talked to Jay Widener last week, and that's going to release on on YouTube tomorrow, and we get into a lot of this stuff as well. I think if your viewers want to follow along more, that would be a good video for them to watch. He had some really interesting things to say about it. I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Well, very cool. So do me a favor, Sam. I'm definitely going to have you back, because obviously people love the information. A lot of people are newbies today, and they're really appreciating it. So they're going to go to your YouTube channel. But I'll have you back probably within a couple of weeks or whatever, depending on how your schedule is, so that we can just kind of give more and more, drip the information out there, because I think we can really serve people here and to get into this market and come out winning on the other end. Where is the best places they can find you currently?
Just go to YouTube, type in To the Lifeboats, and in my banner, kind of up in the top right, I've got links to, I have a Discord channel. I'm not there a whole lot, but there's a link to Twitter and Patreon. So those are the 4 places that you'll find me on the interwebs.
Cool. Very awesome. And a lot of people are asking questions like, where do we invest? What coins? We're not advisors. We can't, like, obviously tell you, oh, go do this one, go do this one. But do me a favor, everyone. Go to his website, or go to his YouTube, go to his Patreon, things like that, because obviously you'll find him. Once you dive down that road, you'll get other really good, reputable people who also talk about this, and that's how you actually learn. Like, I can't tell you how to do something. You have to go research and learn on your own. We're just actually providing the channels for that.
I would just say the key is, in my mind, and I'm a long-term buy and hold, sit back and wait for it to do something or not investor. The key is look for utility, look for a real world use case. You know, Bitcoin was great, and there's a lot of hype around it, but it doesn't have a use case. And something like XRP does. Something like VeChain does. Something like Holo might have one. You know, there's a lot of there's 5,000 cryptos plus 5,000 cryptos out there. There's probably a dozen, maybe, that have real world use cases that are going to change the way businesses do business today, and those are the ones that you want to find and invest in.
Awesome. Sam, I appreciate your time today. I really do. We'll have you back within probably a couple weeks, but everyone, I appreciate you tuning in. You're very popular, Sam. They like your information. So again, I appreciate all you're doing, and keep up the amazing work, man.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Jason Dean, Revolution Network, signing off on this, I think it's Tuesday afternoon with Sam Dodson. Go check out his YouTube channel, spread this far and wide, so we can be the ones who actually can create our new futures, our new economies, our new American, our new world, the way it's supposed to be, which was with freedom, liberty, constitutionality, and all that good stuff. So have a wonderful day. Go invest in your crypto, get more educated, and we're gonna be part of this greatest wealth transfer in history. So have a wonderful one. Be good. Bye-bye.